I started the week in Clayton, New Mexico. I walked into Oklahoma and went to Felt, Oklahoma, Boise City, Oklahoma, Keys, Oklahoma, and then Elkhart, Kansas, and then Rolla, and made it to Hugoton. From Clayton to Felt was pretty far, and Felt to Boise City was pretty far. I remember walking that day. It was like 20-something miles, and I was just beat when I got there. And I already walked like 21 miles or something, and I was going to try to do a couple more, and I could see the town up ahead, but it seemed pretty far at that point. And Roberta came and got me, and she said, "Your mom sent me." And she said, "You probably want a shower, don't you?" I said, "I would love a shower." So she took me back to her house and ended up hosting me at her house. And then she connected me with the Methodist Church. But when I got there, she'd made some phone calls and stuff, but nothing really came through in Boise City. So when I got there, the woman said, "Oh, yeah, Roberta had called me." And I actually was feeling quite faint when I got there. I have this thing that's happened a few times where I get somewhere, once I take off my pack, which I did at the grocery store before Roberta called me. So when Roberta called me, I was just about passing out. So anyway, so she said, "Okay, it's just two blocks away." So I walked over to the Methodist Church, and they were quite unprepared for me, even though they'd had some phone calls from her. She literally took up a collection from these women at the church, and they also threw in money for the hotel and for me to eat dinner and breakfast. So I stayed at the Crystal Hotel, which had just recently reopened, and I also ate dinner at the Crystal Restaurant, which had recently opened, and then got up the next morning, and once again, the waitress was really nice. She said, "I know a bunch of people in your next town," which was Keys, "and I'll call around." And I said, "Oh, that's so nice of you." And she said, "And breakfast is on me." So she bought my breakfast. And I had done a blog post about waitresses are the nicest people. Waitresses are the nicest people. Their job is to be nice to you, but that doesn't mean they have to be generous, and kind and helpful. And I've had a lot of people be really nice to me in restaurants, so waitresses, that is. Anyway, so I walked to Keys, and kind of nothing really came through from what she thought she had something set up for me, or the people who at the hotel thought they had something set up for me. So even though Roberta had called the minister of the Baptist church, he was not expecting me also. So I had two times when they didn't really expect me. So I called him and I said, "I'm at the park." And he said, Oh.
The local place.
I must have got my wires crossed. I heard you had a place to stay, and I said, I don't think so. I haven't heard anything from anybody, so I had your number.
Well,
and he
my
made
hometown
about
had
20 calls for me, and it's harvest time. And it's a terrible season for the farmers, actually. There has been no rain. None. So all the dry farmers, they didn't even plant crops this year, hardly. And a lot of the cattle farmers are just selling their meat and selling it. They can't continue to feed them. There's no grass. There's no hay. Everything's expensive. So they're just selling off a lot of their stock. Anyway, so it's harvest time, and a lot of people were out, and it's coming up on 4th of July. So he couldn't find anything, and he felt terrible. And I said, "No, it's fine." He said, "Well, I can put you up in the church, and you can sleep in the youth room." And I said, "That's fine. There's couches. I'll be comfortable." And then from there, I walked to Elkhart. That's right, Elkhart. And that was my mom had actually, again, called ahead there. And I said, "I'm sorry, Mom, to keep having you do this. I can't even make a phone call. And I'm not sure about my reception is in and out. No one can hear me. There's just wind that pushes you off the road. Wind, dirt, dust, wind. It's the dust bowl." Yep, it's Oklahoma. I'm in the Dust Bowl region, and it is drier than it was back in the 30s. They have had less rain. The only reason things are not a big giant dust cloud, like I just heard they had in Phoenix, is that their irrigation practices and their farming practices are much better. Back in the 30s, they overturned all the grass, and one of the guys who moved to that area, who's also a Native American and also a cowboy, forget his name. Anyway, I was listening to a program about the Dust Bowl because I've been looking things up about it. It's really interesting to me because it makes it very real to walk through this region during a drier time than what they had in the 30s. In the 30s, they had consecutive years with no rain. But he said when he saw the farmers turning up the grass to put in crops, he's like, wrong side up, you know? And the grass is what holds together the grasslands. And I've been walking through grasslands, and there is no grass. Only thing alive are the cacti, and for some reason the weeds along the side of the road managed to somehow eke out enough water to sustain themselves and flower for next year. And there's the edges of the highway are covered in flowers from Arizona to Kansas so far. And they go about 4 feet off the side of the road, and there's just nothing beyond that. And when I got to Elkhart, my mom had made some phone calls and connected me with the Lutheran minister there. And it was funny because he's Missouri Synod, and my dad grew up Missouri Synod Lutheran, and his grandfather was a Missouri Synod Lutheran minister, and they are known in German Lutheran. And when I told the minister that, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's really cool. He was like, he took me all around, gave me a tour of town. He took me out to this area that they had a big burn, and it looks like the moon. It's sand dunes. This is farmland. There's little sticks of cut off corn stalk sticking out of sand dunes. And it makes it really relevant to do this project on foot at this time. It's Boise City. Boise, like voice, Boise City. When I stayed there, I heard that I looked up some stuff, and they had not had rain in May. They had not had rain for 222 days. It made the New York Times. I don't know that they've had any rain since then. They have had a ½ inch of rain this year. This area has had 2 inches. They usually have 15. And they're just using their wells to water the corn and have corn crops. They've got some cotton crops that are functioning, but it's tough times. Just not fun to be a farmer right now. So he took me out and showed me that area. He also took me out to the Point of Rocks to show me the Santa Fe Trail, the real Santa Fe Trail, not the one along the highway that has a big sign that says Santa Fe Trail. Actually, it's 20 miles that way. But and it was really cool because you could see where the wagons had gone through. It's still there. It goes along where the river would be. He took me to the natural spring up there, and he's like, "Holy moly, this is all dried up. I've never seen it like this." So, and he pumped the handle on there's kind of like an artesian well or something. He pumped the handle on the water thing there, and it took like 8 or 9 pumps, and some water came out. But he's like, usually it comes out at like 3. Like, wow. And so there, I imagine it's the Okaloosa Aquifer or something around here, but which includes like Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, and they have to be draining their wells too. And somebody was talking about the irrigation and the fact that, like, well, that's our drinking water too. So, and I've seen this all along. I mean, last week's episode will also mention this because it's been crazy dry all through Arizona, all through New Mexico, all through that smoke and crazy, the only precipitation I have seen on this trip was snow in Arizona in May, which they said hasn't happened in 50 years. So when I got to Hugoton, I actually did get a little rain. And that was exciting. It not just rained, but it rained while we drove to the grocery store. And as we went into the grocery store, it was still raining. So I was like, woo! I've been I pray for rain for this region, and on a personal level, it's been really nice that it hasn't been pouring rain on my electronic equipment. So then, I guess I should finish up the week. I went to, walked to, from Elkhart. I stayed a couple nights, and they so the United Ministries has this program where they'll put up, it's called Travelers Program. And he said, you're definitely one of the more interesting travelers we've had. Because sometimes it's, they have a lot, he said, we have a lot of hitchhikers and walkers that come through this area. And sometimes they're just, someone who's destitute and crossing the country or whatever. He said, for some reason, we're on that highway of travelers. And so he took me to the police station so I could sign in. And then he gave me a hotel voucher and food vouchers. And then he gave me a tour of the town. And then he took me to the grocery store so I could use my food voucher because he's like, I know they're going to be like, what is this? And sure enough, they're like, what is this? He's like, it's a program through United Ministries. This person is allowed to buy food here for $5. And so I got some trail mix. And then he took me to one of the restaurants in town. And it just so happened that somebody from his congregation was there. And she invited me to sit down. And I talked with her and her husband. And they ended up buying me dinner. So even though I had the voucher, so. And then they took me to my hotel. And the hotel was really cool because the guy who owns it is Filipino. And he just loved what I was doing. He just thought it was the coolest thing. He's like, really? Really? Walking? Nobody does that. Just walking? He's like, well, I mean, some people do that, but that's very few people in this world decide to walk 2,000 miles. And they told me, like, different people he'd heard of that were doing this and somebody who'd stayed there who was bicycling across the country. But he said, well, let me make you breakfast. So he made me breakfast. He made me scrambled eggs and with soy sauce and and fresh fruit. And I said, well, I usually cook for my hosts. So I stayed 2 nights there because I needed a day off desperately. I'm in the hundreds with over 20-mile stretches. And I can do that for a couple days, but 3-4 days, I had done 80 miles in 4 days and I was just cooked, literally cooked. So took a day off and updated all my stuff. And then I cooked him dinner, and he actually cooked me a Filipino dish ahead of time with mung beans and coconut milk. And that was pretty cool. And he gave me a discount so I could stay another night. And then not only that, he actually drove my stuff to Rolla, the next town. He said, why don't you just go with your little backpack, and then I'll drive your stuff to you. I was like, oh, come on. He's like, no, it's like nothing. It's like 15 minutes in a car. I know it's going to take you 5 hours, 6 hours, but for me, it's nothing. So, got to the next town, and he brought my stuff, and I met with Mary, and then I stayed at her house, and then I cooked her dinner, and that was fun, and they were, her daughter was in the process of moving, and they were helping her find an apartment, and still they took me in, which was really cool.